In this video, I'll be covering the match between G2 Esports and Chaos for Playday 8 of the Rainbow Six Siege Pro League EU Season 10. Before we do that, as a one-time thing, I want to cover the map bans. To start, G2 has to ban Border since it was the last map they played, and Chaos, for the same reason, bans Cafe. G2 then bans Coastline, which is the map I predicted. They banned this map because it's Chaos's strongest map. Chaos then bans Bank, which I found surprising to do so early, and to me indicates that Chaos knows a little less about what they want to do versus G2. The reason being is that teams know that Chaos favor Bank as their map ban. They have somewhere above a 30% ban rate on Bank. And G2 could have banned Bank here instead, but because Chaos bans Bank so early, that doesn't happen. Pardon that B. In any case, G2 then bans Consulate. Consulate is the most banned map from G2. I made another mistake, which was not listening to my own advice about the best of one format when it comes to Pro League. So what I said is that a team needs to master 5 maps and can ban 2 maps. Well, G2 historically bans Consulate and Border, and then plays the other 5 maps. Likewise, Chaos prefers or thinks that they've mastered Consulate despite their 0-1 and 6 record on Consulate. I thought at the halfway season mark there would be an adjustment made, but clearly Chaos wanted to ban the map that they know they're weakest at, which is Bank first, and whether or not they make the adjustment on Consulate will remain to be seen in a later playdate. Then, predictably, Chaos bans Villa, which is their second most banned map, and we're left with Clubhouse. On to the operator selection, or operator bans. So G2 gets the ban first because they're on defense. They choose Capitao. Capitao is a great ban because he denies any tricking that may happen on CCTV wall. CCTV wall is very important for CCTV and cache, as well as gym and bedroom. There's an argument made that he can be used on the church wall too, but I haven't seen it yet. He's also just a strong operator in general. Very oppressive. Chaos bans next, and they choose one of the hard breachers, which is predictable. On Clubhouse, it's standard to see at least one hard breacher banned, or Thatcher. Thatcher, of course, because he assists in hard breaching. Typically, you like to see Maverick banned because Maverick's a lot stronger than, say, a Habana, in that he completely denies players from tricking since he directly interacts with the wall and has the potential to open it through Maverick tricking. In any case, what does Habana being banned mean? Well, it's just another way to deny a little bit of the vertical pressure that attackers could create by opening up hatches, as well as any Habana tricking that could occur in shooting at the middle of 2 reinforced walls and having the pellets open up both sides, or really one side because the bandit will most likely trick one side but not have enough time to trick the other.
Wild, hasn't it?
Yeah. So Capitao, Habana, no Maverick.
Chaos then has their defensive ban, and they choose Mira. EU doesn't like Mira. Moreover, she is a very oppressive operator who forces you typically to work vertically in order to remove her black mirrors. Lastly, G2 bans Maestro. Maestro being banned means that an IQ is probably necessary. This is because Valkyrie and, or more importantly, Echo will have his cloaked yokais persist throughout the round without the assistance of a IQ or really good eyesight to remove those yokais. It's also worth mentioning that Twitch has become almost useless because her drone can't open the black mirrors or destroy the evil eyes. But that's maybe more relevant for ranked play if these were the operator bans that you encountered.
You see some variants in North America, as well as aces.
Skip a little bit.
But yeah,
the operator's locked in. The big thing to note is that G2 is bringing a lot of hard breach Nile and Mute, Bandit, and Cade. And Chaos is bringing a lot of hard breach and Thermite Maverick. Those are the last two hard breachers, as well as Thatcher, who enables that hard breaching. This is fairly predictable. Chaos is also bringing Buck and IQ, which assist with creating vertical pressure as well as vertically removing any utility that hard breaching the Nile utility from G2 side. But more important than all of that is the way that the 6-pick phase plays out. What we're going to see is the smoke changes to Valkyrie and the IQ changes to Jackal. This is significant because if the Valkyrie continues to persist because the IQ switched off onto Jackal, then G2 wins the operator selection phase simply because they fooled Chaos into thinking that IQ was less useful. Jackal, of course, is very strong. There is no counter to him, but IQ was the counter to Valkyrie, and because G2 doesn't show Valkyrie initially, Chaos feels comfortable swapping off of IQ. So it's really well played by G2.
Maybe.
And we'll see how the round plays out because of it.
Like in his lore?
Yeah.
Okay, I
don't think this is...
Looking at G2's defensive setup, they've dedicated 4 reinforcements on the garage wall, as well as this additional reinforcement between CCTV and garage. There are some shotgun holes on the CCTV wall on the bottom of the screen, and this is to help with sound propagation and tricking. If you didn't know, sound propagates through reinforced walls a little more easily if you create that soft destruction. But ultimately, this wall will also be reinforced. And then there are 3 reinforcements in construction, the exterior one that I did last, as well as the 2 between construction and cache. That's it for reinforcements. We have some soft destruction and construction in the form of the hatch being opened up, which I thought was very interesting, especially considering that G2 is barricading this door between construction and bedroom. I actually don't understand the theory behind this. To me, it indicates that G2 has a plan on using the vertical angle from below construction and picking up the hatch into construction to contest anyone who might push there, but we don't see this happen. Not this round, at least. There are additional soft destruction created in the red and cache wall, as well as some default soft destruction between site. And most importantly is this rotation hole that is created in between garage as well as CCTV. So what happens is because G2 has dedicated these 2 reinforcements in garage, a player in garage only needs to worry about pressure coming from outside garage as well as lounge and stock. Well, this pressure never comes in this entire round, and so the player on catwalk can sit here very comfortably, but more importantly, the player in catwalk has this angle through the soft destruction that can deny all of sight in a push coming from the west side. What we'll see is that Chaos gets funneled through CCTV window as well as construction, and the player in garage is able to deny it through this horizontal angle created through the soft destruction between garage and CCTV.
The youngest one is.
Hold that thought. Well, here we go. In the meantime,
During their defensive setup, Valkyrie throws out this black eye. Because Chaos swapped off the IQ in favor of Jackal, if Chaos doesn't detect this black eye through their eyes rather than any utility, then Chaos will be punished with the persistence of that intel from the Valkyrie. Maverick is very quick at deleting this reinforcement, and Chaos through the round will show a great job of quickly establishing that horizontal pressure with Maverick.
Yeah, you need to watch out for also anybody just moving close to that drone hole. It happens more often than a lot of people would like to admit.
So at 2:11, we heard the skeleton key being used to open up that horizontal pressure into CCTV from CCTV wall, which is great because in theory this should punish G2 or make them worried about staying in CCTV.
Known to be so. Electricity from the Electroclaw or Bandit Battery persists. So if you try to
at this point, Chaos has used the utility from Maverick and Buck extremely effectively, but Thatcher hasn't used a single EMP, and Jackal hasn't used a single Inox scan, which is detrimental to the team considering they swapped IQ off in favor of Jackal, and IQ would obviously help with detecting any black eyes. What I find curious too is Secretly has a great chance to use the Inox scanner by breaching vertically and using the soft destruction to detect any footsteps from underneath. So Maverick is able to Maverick trick the construction wall, and that forces Buck to rotate from CCTV wall over to construction in order to soft breach the wall that Maverick just opened. I'd like to mention that Thatcher could have just Thatchered that wall, and Thermite could have just opened that wall, but that's not what Chaos chooses to do. I suppose that there's still pressure in cash, so there's a chance that you lose a player doing so, but I am giving a possible alternative for opening up construction. Most importantly, because Buck leaves construction wall, this horizontal pressure that was created from CCTV wall no longer exists, and Bandit is able to play in CCTV towards the bomb very aggressively. Let's note something about G2's setup. They've brought this deployable camera in order to detect any horizontal pressure from CCTV wall, so Bandit Pengu knows he can sit here without being punished. It's worth noting because that means that Jaeger, instead of bringing barbed wire, probably brought this deployable camera, and also Bandit isn't bringing C4. So there's less plant denial on the board than is maybe expected. In any case, Maverick, not thinking that a player will play in CCTV wall, decides to face check CCTV window. And Pengu, being able to play in this position, is able to punish. There's no refrag because Buck is in construction opening up the wall and has left his position on CCTV wall. Jackal shows us that Chaos has not prioritized opening the garage wall at all, so the player in Catwalk or Garage is able to sit there very comfortably. This is a huge misstep from Chaos as well. And we'll actually later see that Jaeger hasn't even had his barricade in Garage opened up yet. So he's sitting very calmly. And there it is. And there it is. That barricade needs to be opened up by Chaos within the first 10 seconds of the round.
He panics. He has to stay back. I think he'll just be shot there and will miss Vitaly.
So Buck tries to retake this horizontal pressure from CCTV wall in order to execute their plan. There's 20 seconds left. They're trying to create a pinch onto site. What happens is Buck essentially retakes his position, and that deployable camera most likely calls out Buck's presence there horizontally. So Pengu is able to frag out the Buck and completely remove the pinch that Chaos was setting up to create. This is relevant for the following reason. Well, first, I'd like to note that Pengu immediately is prepared for the refrag coming from CCTV window, despite the fact that he's reloading right now. But he knows that it's going to come out. He's almost able to net this kill, but it's not really important if Pengu does or doesn't. Pengu alleviates a ton of site pressure by removing the pinch, and what we see instead is Chaos is fatal funneled through CCTV window as well as construction into cache in order to execute their plan. Jaeger is holding this line of sight from garage all the way into cache and is able to deny all of this west entry from Chaos. The only way that Chaos is able to successfully plant is if they plant deep into cache. But Valkyrie has this awesome crossfire on top of red stairs that would prevent any player from doing that. This crossfire that G2 has set up is the exact way you would want to deny any plant in cache when the plant is only coming from the west side. It really falls apart if Chaos has that pinch from outside, but Bandit was able to get the kill on Buck, which completely diminishes that pressure. So great job in terms of positioning from Valkyrie as well as Jaeger in order to win that round. A reminder, that was a 2v3 for G2, but plays from Pengu and positioning from the Valkyrie as well as Jaeger win G2 that round. The other problem is the fact that Chaos simply didn't use their operators effectively. Thatcher wasn't used, and Jackal wasn't used. So I think it's very interesting that those are the two operators that they continue to bring. Or really, what I question is the Jackal as a pick. Thatcher is obviously very strong on Clubhouse, period. You're not going to swap off him. But Jackal is maybe not necessary for Chaos if they're not going to use Jackal's utility at all.
Was a bit of a mess on the side.
G2 goes to Church and Arsenal next and shows Bandit, Pulse, Smoke, Jaeger, Cade. The thing about Church and Arsenal is that you're not going to be able to deal with C4 operators, and G2 is bringing potentially up to 3 of them. And certainly with the Pulse, there needs to be some kind of way in order to counteract that. Who can counter that is IQ. Again, I'm questioning the motive behind Chaos bringing Jackal when the utility earlier wasn't used. From G2, obviously we're sticking the hard breach denial, and the same can be said about Chaos with the assistance of Thatcher.
For the recovery, but it shouldn't need to be.
Looking at G2's defensive setup, they've dedicated 3 panels onto Church Wall, as well as this third one that allows a player to play in the position more safely in Armory. The next 2 are, of course, going to be on Dirt for the Smoke to play there, as well as some interesting reinforcements in Blue. One here, as well as one here. I am guessing that there is a line of sight that I'm unfamiliar with that goes all the way through Blue into Dirt. And if you have a Smoke playing in Dirt, you would obviously want to remove that line of sight. The next interesting piece is the hatches. So G2 decides to reinforce the hatch in Moto, as well as the default hatch in Kitchen. This isn't interesting in itself. What is interesting is that G2 creates soft destruction in a rotation, or 2 rotations in Blue, and actually leaves the hatch in Blue unreinforced. They're also going to put a player, Jaeger, in Blue and pair him up with a couple of ADSs. If this hatch is opened up, then Chaos can create tons of vertical pressure into Blue and effectively remove the player playing there. Not only that, but because G2 has opened up a rotation between Blue, then once they have control of Blue, that is Chaos, they also have an easy entrance into either one of the sites.
I think it's clean. I think it's clean.
Yeah.
So, Chaos is going to have Jackal entry through this reception area into Western Hallway,
If you remember,
sort of through Strip. He has an opportunity to Jackal track the footsteps there, but forgoes it, which I find is quite curious. Intel is always appreciated, and knowing the exact position of a player is never detrimental. I think in theory, they're thinking that they can scan later and get that location, but what they actually do is they commit Jackal all the way down onto main stairs in an effort, I believe, to cut off the rotation between site to this super long angle. He's also able to contest anyone that might play in Moto, but I don't think that's the plan for establishing this pressure so quickly on main stairs.
Early on, and I'm not sure how that happened. Maybe from a shot from Goga.
Buck is trying to vertically soft breach down onto the bandit in order to contest his tricking. The thing is that Buck peeks down that vertical pressure immediately, and Bandit also peeks up that vertical pressure. Bandit ultimately wins the gunfight, and Buck dies. Right here is a huge mistake from Jackal. Jackal runs past stock with the opportunity to open up stock hatch, and when a hatch is soft, you open up that vertical pressure. Anyway, Chaos committed Buck to remove the bandit. You have the Thatcher, and there are tricks to countering bandit tricking, using that EMP grenade and placing a exothermic charge on a pre-placed bandit charge. So it's curious that Chaos hasn't rotated the Thatcher over downstairs to remove these 3 bandit charged walls.
It's a very tiny hole, and you see here the edge of it in the backpack. Madeline is carrying. Kanto will take a tiny bit of damage, but
There's that deployable shield. Okay, so Jackal is going to start contesting the players in blue hatch, or in blue. If the hatch is open, then this becomes a lot easier. What happens instead from G2's side is they have the super long angle established in blue from the Jaeger, but they also have the player Fabian Mazzi, who is going to work his way up the stairs. G2 does something very cool, which is they establish a super long angle and then pressure while Jackal is seemingly reloading or takes his eyes off of that line of sight and push up. Fabian on Mazzi immediately retakes the vertical pressure that Chaos has spent so much time rem clearing for. So now on Mazzi, Fabian has control of the second and first floors as he continues to move through those 2 levels. Here, I think Kanto, from a micro decision, just doesn't need to peek that, but he ultimately wins out. We just saw Mazzi's all the way in bedroom. So again, he retakes all that vertical pressure because you know that if you have vertical pressure looking down into sight, you can of course deny the plant. Jaeger is still able to play in blue simply because there was very little effort towards removing him from blue. There was no pinch, and actually G2 had this kind of 2-pronged attack in order to dissuade any pinch. Again, Mazzi retook vertically, is playing this Moto hatch, and has this awesome crossfire vertically down into church, while Jaeger is holding the cross from blue into church. So Thatcher is a dead man no matter what.
Alright, 2 in a row there from G2. Again though, Chaos keeping themselves in it, favored type of deal. And G2's making that work for them. Overall, this the hard destruction not working as well as I think it could in terms of what.
Okay. Chaos hasn't used Thatcher effectively yet, and actually decides to completely forgo Thatcher, which I think is a big mistake. You just need to use the blue orb that Thatcher has to his disposal. They're also sticking the Jackal, and I would have liked to see Dokkaebi swap for Jackal and Thatcher brought again, but that's not what happens. In any case, we'll look at G2's lineup that they show. There's the Mute, Bandit for that hard breach Nile, as well as the Clash and Castle just to slow down the push from the attacking side. The thing is that G2 will actually 6 off of the Clash onto Cade, bringing even more hard breach denial. So Maverick needs to use his utility super effectively in order to counter these 3 operators, which I think is a huge win for G2. Taking a look at G2's reinforcement strategy, they dedicated 2 reinforcements to the pool wall, as well as 2 to the bathroom and pool hallway. These are fairly standard. And that's actually it for the on-site reinforcements. Of note, there is soft destruction of the hatch, as well as vertical lines or horizontal lines of sight and soft destruction into gym, as well as rotation roughly around here. This is, of course, very important for denying the very easy entry into gym, and you'll even see this in ranked. What I find very interesting is that G2 forgoes the reinforcement here in construction that has that exterior wall. If Chaos reads into the fact that this wall is soft, then Chaos can hold a line of sight that would cut off any roamers from returning from that east end over here. Alright, now let's look at the offsite reinforcements. Okay. So, G2 is going to reinforce the standard CCTV wall, as well as 2 reinforcements between CCTV and cache. There's also 2 reinforcements on red stairs to further support Jaeger in this realm within cache. Mute is going to dedicate a mute jammer on the CCTV wall, and this will be significant because of how much utility Chaos dedicates to removing just a mute jammer. So, the Maverick and Buck combo are going to Maverick trick the CCTV wall. Of course, they don't need to dedicate this amount of utility to opening up the wall. G2 has put their hard breach or primary forms of hard breach denial in Cade and Bandit on the pool side instead of the CCTV side, and Chaos simply doesn't know this. So Chaos dedicates tons of Maverick's canister to opening a wall that could have very easily been opened with a single poke in the middle of the CCTV wall, and then a thermite breach. Maverick now comes over to pool wall, removes that mute jammer, but what they don't know is there's a bandit actually in place to trick, and that's also where Cade is. Cade's going to play this angle to contest anyone who tries to contest the bandit from removing the chart or from being able to trick. And ultimately Cade gets the frag onto thermite. At this point, Chaos should lose. Without a hard breach and without having opened up the pool wall, it's very difficult to entry into the site of gym or bedroom. Bandit is playing this position in cache with a soft wall to his left. If, as Kix will note, if Chaos drones that position of Bandit out, then Bandit should immediately die. After tons of time expended, Chaos is finally able to open up the pool wall, but it really should have been easier. Maverick's going to peek Bandit through the window, and I actually think it was an unnecessary risk because what they could have done is shot through the soft wall. In any case, Chaos is now planning, and simply Maverick is covering the plant in the incorrect direction.
But Uno manages to win it anyways. Even he's surprised.
So the reason why Chaos loses there is because Maverick doesn't cover the plant correctly. You had a player on the window of bedroom who should be locking down that area, and Maverick needs to cover the hallway of pool in case a roamer or Cade decides to walk up into Gym to deny plant.
I'm no Einstein.
If you're moving, then the velocity of your movement influences the toss.
All right. From both teams, we see much of the same. The interesting thing is they're sticking to the Jackal. Again, I've already voiced how I'm not a fan of secretly on Jackal, or rather Chaos using Jackal in their plan. And G2 is bringing as much hard breach denial as possible. They actually swap off the Valkyrie for Pulse, which I think is a mistake because there's no IQ to remove the Black Eyes. But whether you bring Valkyrie or Pulse, I suppose, is a matter of, do you want wall hacks or do you want intel that will persist through the end of the round?
I don't think everyone's used to it yet. And it's clear that Uno's maybe not.
Much of the same reinforcement strategy from G2. The interesting thing is this hatch which is opened up. G2 clearly has a counter-strat that is supposed to deny a push. Let's go back a frame. They clearly have a counter-strat that's supposed to deny a construction take, right? Because a lot of this is being set up to deny that construction take. So what G2 is going to want to do is they're going to use this hatch and contest any hard breach as well as players playing in construction. Construction, to my knowledge, is not a soft floor. So you need to throw or yeet a C4 from below in order to contest that construction push. Likewise, there's this castle, there's not the castle barricade, but there's this barricade here, which I suppose is a way for G2 to have the sound cue that Chaos has made it into construction and then to reorient themselves to counter that. But again, much of the same reinforcement strategy from G2 and operator selection from G2.
Of the C4 would just be whatever it is normally. There's no variance. It was
G2 must have lost the Black Eyes despite the lack of the IQ the first time they played on CCTV, and that must be why they're adapting to a Pulse. Or that's at least my best guess.
You're happy? Good. You can't do that anymore. And he tried to there.
Fabian is the one that actually brought that bulletproof camera, which, as I've noted, I think is very interesting. G2 must prioritize the need for barbed wire, and I do see, I believe, 2 sets, which would be from Bandit and the Jaeger. Pulse is most likely carrying C4, and then Mute has that deployable camera that was vital in the first one of CCTV. Alright, so Jackal is put on a solo roam clear of the basement to ideally clear out the Pulse, who most likely would be playing downstairs. Well, he runs in a Mute instead, which isn't much of a... Oh, it's a surprise that it's Mute, but it's doesn't really matter if it's Mute or Pulse. The thing is that I believe from Secret League's part, he did some very sloppy droning, or Chaos isn't dedicating anyone to help drone in secretly because he is Jackal. The assumption being, as Jackal, I can see footprints. I don't see any footprints. It must be safe to enter. Most importantly, Chaos has the chance to refrag Jackal when Mute rotates. From the blue window, you can get an angle deep into blue and stop Mute from climbing back up these blue stairs. But Buck is too preoccupied getting ready to buck out the CCTV wall, and that doesn't happen.
It is a start. You're locking a runner clear into Pengu, who's just sitting there and finds the freebie. Obviously a great play here for G2.
This is a very cool long angle that Maverick is establishing from logistics. I believe the angle goes all the way from logistics into potentially CCTV. It's not noteworthy because Chaos doesn't net anything from it, but it's an angle that I will certainly explore in ranked and would recommend you do the same.
Drone play was a big portion of this round for G2, but still it slows Chaos down.
So Fabian's still downstairs. He doesn't have a C4, and he actually gets fragged out. Uno, meanwhile, is able to provide tons of intel as Pulse downstairs on his roam.
Uno scanning from below, playing in
The team knows that Chaos is pushing from construction because of the pulse. Pulse just misses that C4 throw, but had he landed it, he would have most likely killed the Maverick who was tricking in construction. Good strategy, bad execution. Jaeger has this very cool angle that contests the window of CCTV. I haven't seen that before, but I'm sure Coconut Bra will cover it in the video.
20 HP. Man, it'd be great if you had like a C4 you could throw through that window.
What's interesting too is now Pulse is being used to contest the entry into construction. So the rotation that I believe Buck just made back into construction from outside is one that you can expect from most attackers at some point. It's just a series of bad timing that Pulse doesn't get the frag there.
That was just unfortunate. Could have gotten a free kill. Pengu goes for way too aggressive. Really important position, and he's going to be able to do a lot of work.
So, once again, this garage catwalk position from Jaeger is able to net a 2k. And that's because Chaos did not prioritize taking out the player in garage twice now. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. G2 is showing really the same lineup that they've brought almost every round, minus maybe the mute. And they've actually decided to swap onto the alibi instead of the bandit. So on Church and Arsenal, you don't really need bandit to trick the church wall, and especially when, or the Mozzie, especially when Chaos didn't even attempt to breach church wall. So they're probably thinking we have a little more freedom in operator selection. Let's bring Mozzie to slow the push of Chaos. I've already voiced how much I hate Jackal being implemented in Chaos's attack strategy. I don't know if it's secretly or if it's just the attack itself, but Jackal has been a waste, and an IQ would really help Chaos most likely, since we can't, I don't know for sure, but G2 certainly has intel that is being left up without the IQ being able to detect that intel. Alright, this is a great example of where the black guys are established and Chaos has no way of knowing that those black guys exist. Let's check very quickly. How many times has Jackal used his scanner? None is the answer. I mean, yes, he has a double kill on this round, but the utility that Chaos is bringing isn't being used. Anyway, at this point, Chaos is just overpowered G2. Not really in a roam clear, but in sheer fragging power. On Clubhouse, you really don't need to contest the entry of the attackers. It's what G2 chose to do, but obviously it doesn't work. Final defensive round for G2. They go back to Church and Arsenal. Velk back on to Mozzie. They clearly thought that Bandit was important to keep, but I would argue he isn't because Chaos isn't breaching Church Wall. Once again, Jackal's making his way down main stairs. Establishing this presence here is clearly very important for Chaos and their attack strategy. And they always do it with Jackal. So yeah, the attack strategy is to have secretly on this main stairs site rotation cutoff, as I spoke about earlier. So Jackal is supposed to cover Maverick doing his work. Because G2 throws that gas canister, it allows Goga on Cade, which we see right here, to push up into the hallway. Cade is then able to make a pick on the Maverick, and who's to blame? Really no one from Chaos' side, as much as just a great coordinated effort from G2 in conjunction with the Smoke and Cade. Chaos's most promising push is most likely to open up the church wall. They still have the Thatcher and the Thermite to do so. The problem is that Thatcher is all the way in blue, So what happens is Chaos needs to walk through any soft rotates that G2 seemingly has given to Chaos and into the crosshair of the player on G2. So Cade is pinching Thermite. If Thatcher moves onto the Bandit quicker, then G2 probably loses the round. But the fact is that Thatcher and Thermite simply don't dislodge the Bandit. What would also be interesting to determine is whether or not Thermite brought flashbangs. I think he did. And those flashbangs, or actually looks like they've all been used. We just saw it for a second there. Yeah, he's used all the flashbangs. So those flashbangs would have been very helpful for pushing out the Bandit, but of course, Thermite didn't have them. Okay. Chaos gets to defend for the first time on Clubhouse. From G2, a very standard attacking lineup. We of course have the hard breach in Maverick and Thermite, as well as the Thatcher to support. Zofia is just a always meta op on really any map, and Buck is no different than what Chaos was bringing earlier. In terms of Chaos, we have Bandit and Mute to deny hard breach, no Cade, and Valkyrie, Jaeger, Smoke. So we'll see if G2 6 picks off of the Zofia onto a... Oh! So very cool. What actually happens is that G2 sees the Valkyrie and 6 picks to the IQ off of Zofia. Meanwhile, Chaos or Red Groove on the Valkyrie 6 picks off the Valkyrie onto the Clash. Clash's natural counter is Zofia, who Kanto, now on IQ, 6 picked off of. So, who wins this? The answer is Chaos. Great job of using that 6 pick phase.
Especially at the end of it, because we don't always get to see it, and this time clearly spotted.
G2 does have a means to deal with Clash in Buck and his nades, but G2 is at a severe disadvantage for handling the Clash without Zofia. Let's talk about Chaos's defensive setup. So they dedicate 2 standard reinforcements on the pool wall, an additional reinforcement between bedroom and pool hallway, as well as some soft destruction here to support Bandit in being able to rotate out of tricking, and also just the ability to contest potentially the breach of pool wall. Another reinforcement is placed in gym, which indicates that a player will most likely play in this position here or closer to bedroom. You might also be trying to cancel a line of sight that a player would have from gym window, but I'm not completely sure. Continuing on, there's a reinforcement dedicated to construction wall. This is more standard than G2 setup. There are 2 reinforcements on CCTV and cache wall, 2 reinforcements on the wall in CCTV itself, as well as this construction reinforcement. My guess, although I'm not very knowledgeable about all the lines of sight in Clubhouse, is that this reinforcement prevents a long angle that can be established all the way in cache into gym, or at least something similar to that. So G2 is able to get the CCTV wall open very quickly. They see the roamer who's playing towards red, and they also are introduced to the Clash. That's kind of a yeet from Uno, very blind, given the fact that the intel on Mute was registered much earlier. A minute and 20 in, your entire attack is pushing from one side. You haven't opened up any pressure into pool. Fabian is downstairs by himself. I'm not really sure what he's doing in that position. More important is the use of Thatcher seems to be something that EU pro teams simply cannot grasp. He had 3 screw tops or EMP grenades left when he died, which is a huge loss in terms of utility and being able to open up the pool wall.
Your flank, your bottom is now exposed to the Jaeger. It's just sitting pretty and waiting for you to make the push on the site and then just collapse.
Alright, so Uno is pushing from construction solo. Meanwhile, G2 has tons of players outside on these windows. Let's take a look at this. So, Uno is trying to support plant by potentially denying anyone who would move into bedroom. But really what he's going to try to hold, I believe, is this angle here that might be canceled by the reinforced wall of gym bedroom. I'm not sure, but as I said, it's what Buck is supposed to support. IQ is holding the line of sight into bathroom. Thermite is holding the line of sight into the hallway, and Goga, who is oddly the Maverick and not the Thermite, is planting. Let's see how it plays out.
Renewal's playing on the stairs, Vito in the bathroom, so very light pressure on the site, which means Goga can plant. Ketty will
plant is going down. Chaos has lost complete control of site. And G2 has done very little to deserve any of that. It's a great take from G2, given just how little they had done that should have enabled that plant. If a player remains behind the... We have to back up a little bit. Let's look at that bird's eye view again. So if a player remains behind this deployable shield here that they have set up, they would have been able to completely deny G2's entry into gym. But Bandit deserts this position, which I find is very curious. It's such a strong position. You've dedicated utility to creating that position and supporting that position, and yet you desert it. We'd have to back up a little bit more to see where exactly Bandit goes. So Bandit's playing on red stairs, and again, he gives up that position and has to peek into it. See, Pengu is holding this angle, and watch as Bandit peeks right into it and dies to Pengu. Alright, now we're on to Church and Arsenal. G2 is going to bring IQ from right out the gate. They're going to stick it, and the reason's because Chaos shows the Valkyrie. Of course, they've 6-picked onto the Cade, but it doesn't really matter. What I think is interesting is the fact that neither team yet has brought Echo, and G2 could have probably improved their defensive holds through Echo, whereas G2 on attack is always bringing the IQ, meaning that Chaos probably doesn't see a benefit to bringing that Echo. Let's talk reinforcements in terms of Chaos' strategy for their basement defense. They have the 3 panels dedicated to Church, the reinforcement we've already talked about in Armory. They'll reinforce Blue, and the 2 standard reinforcements in Dirt to support a player who might play there. And really just the pressure in Dirt, if you can reinforce that, is a give me, since it leads directly into sight. Most importantly, Chaos reinforces the Moto hatch, the kitchen hatch, and the blue hatch. So it'll be a little harder to uproot any player in blue, unlike G2, who decided not to reinforce that hatch previously.
It says crying, laughing emoji.
That's an actual thing. Have you ever used it?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had That is an
Skipping ahead, Legion is going to do a spawn peek. He just narrowly misses killing the Buck. I don't like that Legion, of all operators, is the one spawn peeking simply because Legion has utility that needs to be used only through deployment while alive. So if Legion dies early, then that utility doesn't get realized. But the fact of the matter is, that spawn peek that Legion chooses to do is relatively safe, and Legion doesn't overcommit to it. So he walks away with his life, and having taken a lot of bucks. It's also significant because Uno is now in a position where if he steps on one more goo mine, he might die.
And he's also being watched by camera, so the Chaos are really in control of Goga's position. Find a kill, but that's Crips on the Pengu.
So Pengu was the player on Thermite, and Thermite just died. At this point, G2 has most likely lost because Hard Breach is so important for attacking virtually all the sites.
And Pengu's down. So now G2.
Thatcher doesn't really need to use his EMPs to open up hatches because Maverick should do that through his blowtorch, and getting rid of the Electric Claw isn't really relevant. Instead, how Thatcher should use his EMPs is support Buck in moving forward. Buck is at 1 health, and stepping on a goo mine is again lethal.
He's actually got HP. Yeah, you can tell he's got HP because there's 3.
G2 is able to open up the Moto hatch, which means they'll have to push through, or most likely they'll have to push through into Church.
Honestly, he might not be able to though.
There's still the player in blue though, so entering into Church should be very difficult given the crossfire, which is why they rotate Thatcher into Oil Pit to contest the player in blue. Alright, Smoke has 3 gas canisters and plenty of time. Thatcher is actually able to kill the player in blue, which is significant because that means that the player can push into Moto much more convincingly. The fact that Maverick gets away with this kill is huge in terms of momentum for G2. Smoke, using his gas canisters, could have delayed the push for 45 seconds, and right now we're looking at the 35-second mark in the round. So Smoke contesting Maverick's entry using his shotgun instead of his utility is a big mistake. Fabian and Goga on Maverick are able to now pinch. The problem is there's still a player in Church that G2 seems unaware of, and Thatcher is unable to refrag because Thatcher is too busy looking for the player in Armory. Cade is able to get a 2k, basically just holding, or 3k, just holding down the fort in Church.
But they came so far ahead at the beginning and ended with 2 men still alive. That could have been a G2 retake.
Yeah.
If G2 wanted to win that round, they needed to focus on pushing Cade out. Let's revisit who had the diffuser, because that would also be significant. So it looks like Maverick had the diffuser. So G2 needs to commit to a Church push in this case and needs to pinch Cade. You cannot pay attention to the player in Armory until you dislodge the player in Church, because once again, you need to pinch Cade in order to be able to successfully plant, or at least control one of the sites. Instead, it looks like Maverick commits to pushing the player in Church, whereas Thatcher or Fabian does not and is too busy trying to contest or drone the player in Armory. Maverick most likely needed to wait before pushing into Church.
Nice kill there from Fabian, and the fact that there's no one inside of Moto allows all of these Chaos players to focus.
And also, I question the need for Thatcher to drone out Armory when what they want to do is move into Church in order to enable plant.
maybe you don't have any drones left, right? You've expended so much because you're...
If it goes 2-6-6, then it's
Seemingly much of the same reinforcements from Chaos in that
so 12 rounds
pool wall,
in
this one here, and one dedicated to supporting
for Chaos
pool
right now? Yeah, that'd be really impressive. Gotta say.
pool hallway, that
If this
is,
happen, then man.
unlikely.
as well as a heavy offsite reinforcement
Worth noting
strategy.
that G2 has secured at least 1 point,
Yep.
since they are on match point. So odds are slim.
This is a great example of how to counter
Hey, let's go
any kind of tricking. What you do is you place the exothermic charge first, and then, or you throw the Thatcher's EMP grenade, and then immediately place the exothermic charge onto a pre-placed electrocuted wall in order to deny any tricking. The angle that Buck just killed the player in blue with is the one that I mentioned earlier on how there was a chance to refrag the Jackal that died to Fabian on mute.
The nade goes out to top cache stairs, was not cooked enough, so it will not get the kill despite there not being an ADS.
This is a great pinch from a grenade as well as a player up onto red stairs from the IQ and Buck.
So G2 now racking them up. 2-man advantage. They've got cache control, forcing these defenders to fall back and workshop at the site.
G2 has a heavy lead at this point. They probably don't need to continue with the push that they've created, which is very off meta, and could have most likely opened up the pool wall. That flank is obviously significant for 2 reasons. Number one, G2 knows that Bandit is no longer on pool wall. He's roaming downstairs. Number two, G2 just lost a huge man advantage from a flank. The reason being, there's no one dead, so there's no way to check flank, but also G2 is not bringing any flank denial operators. And G2 is kind of becoming too fixed in this one push without having opened up other areas of the map. And so Chaos is able to read into this and flank around their single push. That deployable camera makes it virtually impossible for Pengu to plant, because Chaos will know about Pengu's entry immediately. That default cam 2 remaining up through Pengu's push is another use of intel that denies Pengu from being able to clutch the round.
Positioning was just perfect to force Pengu away. That's why you leave those holes.
Once again, I don't know why G2 wouldn't open up pool wall, given the fact that Thermite had an extra exothermic charge and Thatcher still had EMPs left. G2, in my opinion, should have rotated out of their construction push and opened up pool wall, because creating that horizontal pressure is huge for any kind of plant in Gem, and essentially denies any kind of counter plant from Chaos by entering that pool hallway. Onto CCTV and Cache. A very standard reinforcement strategy from Chaos in terms of their CCTV hold. Legion is once again trying to spawn peek and just does it way too late. Again, I don't like that. It's Legion who's making that spawn peek attempt. Props to the Buck for predicting that placement of the Legion. I doubt that there was any drone that called that out, as much as just a good pre-fire from the Buck who's learned from past experience.
So make sure you're thorough. Yoga has a lot of experience, he knows, and he is going to be very thorough.
Crypt's taking a decent chunk of damage early on, so
could be healed though.
Yeah,
if he makes it back to the
one adjustment that Chaos has made is they've put the dock on Catwalk. Dock on Catwalk is very strong for 2 reasons. Number one, is he is able to play island positions because he's able to self-stim or revive if he's downed. And number 2, he has an ACOG, so he's able to contest angles much better. More important than that, G2 has spent the time and resources to exothermic this garage wall, meaning that Doc is now under a lot more pressure playing garage.
One stim would go a long way.
The Doc playing up in the catwalk is definitely a very standard play.
What's also interesting is that Chaos has forgoed the Bandit in favor of the Doc and also the Legion.
He's so close! And he fires a single bullet, will hit, but it will alert.
That means that G2 will just have an easier time working their way into the CCTV site and also cache because there's less hard breach denial.
As a whole. Crips has been downed, so
let's revisit that garage pinch or the angles that were used there. So Fabian on upside down rappel of garage door is able to get an angle onto the Doc.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate for G2 trying to take garage.
G2 is heavily stacked up in garage, but they have complete control of it. And now it's very easy for G2 to execute a default plant, simply because there's no flank other than garage itself, and the angle that Buck is playing on that upside down rappel from CCTV wall is able to cut off the rotate back into sight. Plants beginning to come down. What happened there is Kanto peeked into the Legion. Legion gets the frag.
Right off the garage, Uno is watching the diffuser being planted and making sure that it does indeed go down.
All G2 has to do is cover the plant. Plant goes down. In a 1v3, Jaeger is trying to retake, and G2 will end up winning Playdate number 8. To me, Chaos lost that game because of their ineffective use of Jackal and Thatcher. I think, well, Thatcher is a necessary operator for Clubhouse, and they simply need to integrate his use of the EMPs more directly into their attacking strategy. Jackal, on the other hand, is just an operator that didn't use his utility really ever in any of the rounds in a way that won Chaos any rounds. Again, Chaos lost most of the rounds, but Jackal, of course, could be substituted for a more relevant operator, i.e. IQ. So that concludes Playdate 8 for G2. Check back in a couple of days when I'll cover Playdate number 9. Take care.